I hear ego kind of like bouncing in my ear as I ask you about humility, which is interesting. So my question is, where does humility fit into the mindset of a successful entrepreneur?
You're either going to purposefully or intentionally, with, as Kris had said, some vulnerability, lead with a humble mindset, or life is going to teach you humility on the back end. But you can't get away from humility. And that's just, it's so incredibly important to understand that.
All right, so, oh man, I am so excited, Ed, because we get to be in conversation with Professor Matthew Sowcik, University of Florida, studying leadership. I know your bio because I've really admired everything that you've done, but I'd love for you to share with our viewers and listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. Certainly a professor first. Love the idea of teaching. Father of two wonderful boys. My passion is around this idea of leadership and specifically around this idea of a humility mindset. So have done some writing, certainly done podcasts, engaged with coaching around how do leaders in all different contexts have a humility mindset that hopefully sets them apart.
Yeah, and in full transparency, you have been my coach, leadership coach,
Yeah,
on and off again for a bunch of years. I've turned to you.
that's really cool.
I've turned to you many times over the last 5 to 10 years. But you also trained 20, 30 members of my staff over the years as well, and made a huge, profound difference. Mostly young people that you gave tools and little sort of nuances about leadership that really, I think, made a huge difference. So we have some questions for you about how humility ties in to leadership. And you've been spending a good portion of your career researching humility. You wrote a best-selling book called The H Factor, and the H stands for humility. And you talk about how humility is essential for great leadership. But we often hear in entrepreneurship that confidence, ambition, and ego are sort of key drivers of success. And I hear ego kind of like bouncing in my ear as I ask you about humility, which is interesting. So my question is, where does humility fit into the mindset of a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, hey, Kris, that's a great question. Let me ask you a question first. Boxers or briefs?
Oh, I'm going to go with boxers, but they're the
I
brief
love that.
boxers.
Love that.
They're the
See,
brief boxers.
I'm actually going to probably go with the brief boxers.
yeah, I'd say I love that, and I think this is where I want to start off with this. You talk about a bit of a problem that I've run into, certainly that leaders run into, that we have a kind of a singular mindset. When it when it comes to us, we're really complex beings. We're layered. Or let me put it this way: humility is like it's like wearing underwear. You absolutely have to wear it. Once you got it on, you could just layer upon it and layer upon it. I think, whether it's a t-shirt or a hoodie, a full piece suit, as an entrepreneur, humility is kind of that base layer. It's non-negotiable. You keep it on to make yourself feel like grounded, protected. But once you have it on, you can layer on all different things like confidence, ambition, innovation, whatever the clothes you need to fit that situation, it has to go on top of that humility. So when it comes to humility and confidence, I think they absolutely can coexist. I think the research all points to this idea. In fact, there's this great study out of BYU that suggests actually what confidence does is it mitigates or kind of counterbalances arrogance, narcissism, even overconfidence. And that's really important. I think if you think of people like Steve Jobs, great entrepreneur, came out, started Apple, and then got fired, found out that he had a child, was humbled by that. His mother died, it wasn't until his second kind of stint with Apple that he found this humility and really kind of led it to new heights. It was humility, he said, that was this terrible tasting medicine that allowed him to better understand how to take some of the arrogance he had, some of the wisdom he had, and then draw upon other people's ideas, admit mistakes. So humility doesn't compete with confidence, it really does enhance it.
Real quick follow-up before Ed dives in here with a question. So
Yeah.
how closely related are humility and vulnerability?
Mm. It's really, that's a great question. I've had some chances to talk to some people who do a lot of research around vulnerability. Someone like Brene Brown, who's just amazing, have talked about humility as being a really important concept when it comes to this idea of vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable to be humble, but you also have to be humble to be vulnerable. So they really do kind of interchange with each other. And it depends on how you're choosing to use your humility. If you are really proactive, you can be humble first, and then you realize the importance of vulnerability. Sometimes vulnerability will get you kind of forced into being humble in that process.
Yeah, I just want to follow up by saying that I think having read your book, which was amazing, and really kind of like challenge myself to think about humility, because I'm a Tony Robbins guy, think big, go hard, but I was raised by a single mom who taught me to be a really good person. Like, I deeply care about people, and I think that humility, and for that matter, some of the stuff that Brene Brown is doing around vulnerability, I think that they both have this way of weaving into our lives where we aspire to be more humble, to be more vulnerable, but you kind of need to be vulnerable in order to really experience humility. And I think humility, again, this is, I read the book and we're talking to the author, but I think it's a really challenging thing, particularly for confident entrepreneurs, to be able to separate the idea of achievement at all costs. I mean, look at the world we live in today, versus being able to do it in a way that creates a legacy. So with that said, though, Ed?
Yeah, and a lot of what you're saying about humility, it's funny because I never read your book yet. I will definitely read it, but I went through that. So 2011, my sister, my cousin, myself bought our family's business. And we were going gangbusters. We were building it, we were growing it. I was the CEO, and everything I did, 8 out of 10 things I did were right. But they were all small things. They weren't big things that really hurt you. Because I was there. I was always the fallback. I was the guy to change it real quick if something went wrong. And about 10 years into it, I was like, okay, I've been doing 100 plus hours a week, 7 days a week, running this business and growing it. And arrogant amongst arrogant. Like, I was the top of the world. Nobody was stopping me. I was taking everybody's customers. I was growing gallons crazy. I mean, we went from 1.5 million gallons to, and everything in our business is gallons, went from 1.5 million gallons to 140 million gallons in 10 years. And just was going great. And I brought my sister and my cousin. I said, I want to go out and hire a CEO. I want to find somebody to take my spot, run the business, and take it to the next level while I could sit as the president and help where I need to help, be the strategic, really mindset, and help him do what he needs to do, but not be the 100 hours a week guy. And that guy was terrible. We went out, we searched all over, looked for him. I was so excited. I was like, we nailed it, we nailed it, we nailed it. And it was the worst decision I ever made. And you want to talk about getting humility really quick, because when you have to walk in, fire the guy that you hired, that you propped up in front of all your employees, 150 different employees, and say, this guy's our next guy, this guy's great, this guy's great. And when you're the owner, before you have to do it, obviously.
Yeah.
So I had to go back in. I had to kind of keep on the face of, hey, everything's still going well, yada, 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 all that stuff. As in the back of my head, I'm trying to engineer how to unwind one of the most critical people in an organization that I put there. luckily, I mean, I was able to just put myself back in it. But that's how I earned my humility completely. I mean, because before that, I'll say I had very little. But after that, I was full of it. I had I had more humility than you could ever ask for. So back to humility. Yeah, go ahead.
I love that point. I mean, it is the single reason of all the characteristics of all the things I could research, and I get a choice. That's, I've been passionate about this for 30 years now. Humility is it. I think it's often biggest misconception about humility is that it's really kind of passive or this submissive quality. It's like being meek or holding back, but the truth is, humility is actually probably the most powerful
Oh
leadership
yeah.
quality. It's this mindset that doesn't worry if you believe in it or not. It's going to happen to you. Like, if you're not creative, you could probably be really successful hiring someone who's creative. If you're not ambitious, you could still have a really small little a business and do just fine. But humility, you have a choice. You're either going to purposefully or intentionally, with, as Kris had said, some vulnerability, lead with a humble mindset, or life is going to teach you humility on the back end. But you can't get away from humility. And
No.
that's just, it's so incredibly important to understand that. And I hope that those who are listening to this really hear your message there, because so often that's what you hear is you hear entrepreneurs who say, man, I was on top of the world. I knew this business. The business was really successful. And I think the more success you have, the more you're going to learn that lesson of humility if you haven't already. And if you could just purposefully and intentionally start to walk down that path, put that underwear on of a humility mindset, then you don't have to have life teach you that huge lesson that you learned.
Yep. Yeah. No, and it'd be a lot cheaper if I found it out beforehand.
Yeah, that's right.
But along with humility, like you said, you have the underwear. Everybody picks their own pair. You get to put on different layers, and one of the layers that comes really close to humility is resilience. So, how does humility play into that? How do you help leaders develop their resilience in business?
Man, Ed, you're good at this. You turned the underwear and you got it back into the question. I love that. Yeah, I think this is
I have a
especially
good leader
true when
here.
it comes to resilience. Yeah, it's just so true when it comes to resilience. I mean, if you think about it, the world of entrepreneurship, like failure and setback aren't possibilities, they're inevitable. It's just going to happen. So no matter how prepared you are, no matter how smart you are, how confident you are, how planned you are, humility is what you need to stay grounded and adaptable when those issues happen. It's our understanding that we are imperfect, we are incomplete, we are impermanent that helps us move forward. It's not about doubting yourself. It's really about being open to kind of learning, willingness to reassess an approach maybe you had, and not letting your ego, as Kris had said, get stuck in that failing strategy. Humble mindset leaders are actually better equipped to handle adversity from all the research because they don't let setbacks define themselves. They don't see it as a personal indictment on who they are. Instead, they view it as an opportunity. It doesn't mean if you fail, you can't succeed. It just means you have to go a different way in that process. On the flip side, I think ego driven leaders often struggle with resiliency because of the mistakes that they've made certainly define them, and it means that they have a weakness. So instead of kind of changing course, what they do is they invest even more in a failing approach. And what I loved about your story was you said, I had to take my medicine. I had to understand that even though I propped this person up and it was on me, the best choice for the, because you could have sat there and you could have said, no, it's going to work, it's going to work, and you could have extended that another year, another 2 years, all to the failing, not so much of yourself, but dragging down your team, dragging down the organization in that process. So I would argue that probably the cornerstone of resilience is this humble mindset.
I just want to share something with our viewers and listeners. This moment before I ask the next question to Matt is what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is literally share lessons and experiences that have led to my success. Tony Robbins says success leaves clues. It's why we have you on here with us right now, Matt. And as I'm listening to you, I think of two things. Number one, these constructs, these ideas we're talking about are complicated. And there are some entrepreneurs who are inevitably intimidated or overwhelmed or feeling like, oh, I lack this. I want them to know that every day is a baseline. And yes, I would encourage you to dive deeper into these ideas because it'll help you think through and prepare for success and for failure and how to deal with it. And so, some of the ideas we're talking about here are pretty profound, and humility is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs wrestle with and to some degree are overwhelmed by. And maybe that's why this next question is so important. But, why does our society sort of lack humility in leadership today? Or is that not true? It feels like it's true. There's more ego-driven leadership and other types of leadership than the humble pie, stand up, in a pair of jeans and a black shirt and speak from your heart about the vision you have and the experience you want people to have around your business. So is there a lack of humility in leadership today?
Yeah, Chris, you've hit on something I think that is so really important. And it really doesn't take any more than just looking out at politics or looking out at business and seeing those people that we elect or the people that we ultimately promote to know that what you say is just so true. The leadership today glorifies this idea of the loudest, most confident voices, the ones who seem absolutely 100% sure of themselves, even when they don't have the answers. It's like we've almost collectively come together and said that confidence, certainty equals strength, and that humility equals weakness. But I couldn't tell you how fundamentally flawed that is and what it's costing us. And we see what it's costing us every single day. I think the main reason is we see this humility lacking today is that we've created a culture that rewards overconfidence. We like that bravado. We like people who come in. It's almost that white knight syndrome of this one person is going to save us, and we know deep down we know, and entrepreneurs know that's not how systems work and the world works. Not one person can save us from really the difficult challenges we have. We need collectively great minds and great people in a room to be able to do that. I think in board meetings, there's that unspoken pressure, pitches, there's that unspoken pressure that you have to have all the answers. And I haven't even mentioned social media where all you got to do is Facebook or Instagram, and everyone has the perfect picture and they're doing everything right. And man, every single consultant I see there pitches the idea of the perfect leader. A leader will do this or a leader will do that. We have so few people. And I think I love that about this podcast is the idea that Ed and you are talking about, man, I failed on this. Like I blew this completely and it happens. And this is what I learned from it. We need so much more of that. The idea that we're human, so we're imperfect, incomplete, impermanent in this process. That's the proper perspective of who we are as leaders. And I do think that voice would help others. The danger is without humility, we get into this echo chamber where only certain voices are heard, only certain ideas are valued. The strongest, loudest, most charismatic are the people who set the example instead of those diverse perspectives, instead of the understanding that we're all learning every single day in this process. So, as we kind of prioritize ego over humility, we set ourselves up for really long-term failure. And it's not just me who says this, it's all the research. It's Jim Collins. Like you can go back and just see humility, but we're in a world where that doesn't grab the attention. But I promise you, if you really want to be an effective leader, if you don't want to worry about the other stuff, a humble mindset is the way to go.
Yeah. And did you guys ever read the book Effective Executive or Ultimate Ownership? It's a Navy SEAL book. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of it is what is talked about there, and that's one of the only books I've ever actually read through. It was with Jocko and a couple other SEALs, and they talk about going sideways and how when things go right, it's never you that makes it go right. It's always your team that makes it go right. When things go wrong, it's always you that made it go wrong, and you got to fix it when you're a good leader. And
Ed, I talk about this idea of humility as just being a proper perspective of yourself, a proper perspective of how important people are to you, and a proper perspective of how you're impacting the overall environments and a bigger piece to you in that process. And that's what it is it's the realization that other people really matter, really matter in leadership. And oftentimes we forget that.
Yeah, and one thing I went through when I was going through the transitions of that person I brought on board, I laughed a little bit when he brought up that pompous, ego-driven leader. That's what that guy turned into, which I hope he doesn't. If he sees this podcast, he'll get some fresh air. But that's what he turned into, was that pompous, ego-driven leader. That when there was a guy in my business who's still with me, my COO, he was bringing the data and telling him you got to make some changes and all this stuff. He's like, nope, that's not how we do it. We're doing it this way. And that's when I had to step in about 5-6 months later and redo it. But while I was going through engineering how to redo it and how to restructure it, one of my biggest concerns was, well, they trusted me for 10, 11 years. They trusted me to get them to trust this guy. Now I'm coming back in and firing this guy. How the heck are they going to trust me to go down the road again with me and maintain my authority with them as my employee? How do you help people do that?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the truth? But what's the alternative at that point? Is it to continue to convince folks that this is the right move? And I think that comes down to this idea of psychological safety, which is impacted by humility. I think it comes down to the idea of transparency, which is impacted by humility. I think the alternative to that is to lie to yourself and lie to others that this is the right decision because you don't want to seem weak or you don't want to seem like you've made a mistake. What I have learned is that people don't expect you to be perfect. They don't expect you to have all the answers. And in fact, all the research suggests that if you really want to empower people, admitting that you don't know everything, asking people for help, asking people for forgiveness, that in fact, strengthens cultures. It certainly allows people to see you as human, and that's what we are. And all leaders are, in fact, human in this process. So I would imagine that you've recovered nicely from that. And the reason, because, while it stings, and humility often does if life's teaching us that lesson, it's one of those things where people see you go through it, they understand it, and they're willing to continue to give you a chance. Now, if you continue to make mistakes and you continue to not learn your lesson, then humility will ultimately teach you that lesson, that you can't keep just forcing that opinion forward. But I don't think the idea of us making mistakes as leaders, as entrepreneurs, is something that others, unless we have that ego, unless we have put ourselves above everyone else, I think people are willing to understand, engage, and what I have found, feel empowered to help that leader achieve those goals.
Yeah, one thing I did through that transition that was real cool was I kind of identified 3 to 4 really key players within the business and worked with them and gained their confidence before I made the transition and helped them and let them help me fix it. So I went to them, they were each department heads, and I said, how would you do this? What would you do different? Guys, I got to be honest with you. We got to talk to you. Took them out for drinks or this or that. And said, if I find out you're talking about this and disrupt it before my plan's done, you're going to be going with the guy. But if you can help me fix this, we're going to all work together and fix this. And I brought in 3 to 4 key people on a transition team, in theory. And when I did the transition, I worked the new leader out along with with 2 of his other personnel he brought in really quickly in about 24 hours. And instantly I had the transition team ready. We picked it right back up, got right back to work, and got it done.
Yeah, I can't suggest enough, Ed, how it's humility and your humility that helped you get there. I mean, the awareness that other people are going to be important for the success of this issue that, had been caused is just such an important point. I often refer to that show Undercover Boss. It's like the most crazy show in the world.
Well,
Like they
that's what I
dress a
felt like I was
CEO up
doing.
with a mustache, and people are like, "Who could this possibly be?" But the whole thing is around humility. It's this idea that they go out and they find out that surprisingly, all the people on the front line, all the people who work for them matter so much. And I think that's to some degree is this proper perspective of others, that if we really want to have a successful business, the leader has to be important, but every single person in that organization is contributing, is important, and is setting the things like culture and goals and engagement for everyone to be successful. So I think that's really important to suggest, is that it's humility that got you out uh, of that situation, and certainly the learning process. But at any moment you could have said like, oh my gosh, I'm done with this. This is just too much of a pain. And I think that's where humility and resilience come together.
So Matt, I hope you don't mind, but like part of the way we're producing this show is we want to be able to bring in extraordinary guests like yourself and give our audience some bites of the apple, if you will, your knowledge, your experience. And so I'm going to ask you a final question. I know people want us to continue to interview you, but listen, there's going to be a lot of different ways that people can connect with you, which I will make sure that they discover. That said, a lot of our viewers are going to be entrepreneurs at different stages. If there was one challenge that you could give those entrepreneurs listening right now, where they could practice humility today, what would it be?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Not enough podcasts ask that question. I think that's so important. If I could challenge every single entrepreneur right now listening to your podcast, one thing that I would absolutely want them to do, one small thing that I would ask them to do, is to ask individuals on their team one simple question. What's one thing I could do better as a leader to impact this organization? It sounds easy, right? But here's the catch. You have to do it genuinely, without defensiveness, without, just talking and making excuses and, oh, I do it, but actually listen to what they say. Don't interrupt. No justifying, just listening. And then take one piece of what people said and put that into practice. So asking, what's one thing I could do better as a leader to impact this organization? And it does something that is really remarkable. It takes care of all 3 areas of humility. It says, 1, I want to learn, so please tell me. 2, I value you as someone who could teach me. And 3, it's important to understand how I'm impacting the bigger organization. Why this challenge? Because I think deceptively simple, it's just incredibly powerful. It shows your team that you're interested, vulnerable, willing to learn, that you understand that you can learn and grow, and it builds trust and strengthens that culture. So that's the challenge. Ask a team member, listen to them, engage with them. Just that one question. What's one thing I could do to be a better leader within this organization?
Matt, you're unbelievable. I want to thank you for your time and your friendship and your leadership in my life. How can people get in touch with you? How do they buy the H Factor? Just give us a quick 30-second pitch on how people could connect with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Kris. There's a few different ways. One, you could certainly get the H Factor on Amazon, so please feel free to do that. I would encourage you. I'm at the University of Florida, so it's my last name, Sowcik, Sowcik, at ufl.edu. And certainly reach out to Kris or Ed, because I think humility has a place everywhere except fantasy football. And they both beat me and taught me humility this last year. So I am certainly interested in meeting with your folks, hearing how your podcast is going, and helping in any way possible. Both of you are amazing. Kris, I think the world of you. So happy to be on here, and all the best of luck on this podcast and all your ventures kind of moving forward.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
And for our viewers, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. We explored some really important topics on the importance of mindset. And if you could get your mind straight, this M&A game, mergers and acquisitions, becomes a lot easier. So in our next episode, we're going to dive back into that topic, and Ed's going to share some more stories, and I am going to as well. Thanks to our guest today, Dr. Matt Sowcik from the University of Florida, and we will see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.